I'm going to share a few thoughts I have about regionalism against the US imperialism, and then I'm going to read a poem that I wrote. Okay, here I go. Thank you. Okay. We have a free trade agreement with the United States. We host US naval logistics operations out of Changi. We were one of the earliest and most enthusiastic signatories of frameworks that embedded us into the American dominated world economic order. I don't think that we can claim to be a neutral nation. We are complicit in American dominance, in American bullying, in American atrocities around the world. This alignment with American supremacy has been profitable. Singapore's prosperity demonstrates this. There are approximately 1.6 million migrant workers in Singapore, made up of people from Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Indonesia, and the Philippines. They work in construction, in marine industries, in domestic work. They take care of our families. They build the prison-like dormitories they now live in. Under the Employment of Foreign Manpower Act, their work permits are tied to a single employer, meaning if they lose their job or if they complain about conditions, they lose their right to be here. They cannot organize independently. The Industrial Relations Act excludes them from the protections that cover citizens. They are slaves by another name. Boo. Yes. They live in purpose-built dormitories which fall under the Foreign Employee Dormitories Act, housing tens of thousands of people in a single facility. We all saw the consequences of this play out in 2020 when COVID tore through those dormitories while Singapore was congratulating itself on its pandemic response. In addition to that, the government's response to public outcry about their continued mistreatment, such as being transported in lorries, has recently resulted in a ban against caged lorries. Even that is pathetic given the 1:100 ratio of caged lorries to open lorries on the road right now. It's absurd because of all migrant workers killed when they were transported in lorries, none were in caged lorries. I don't want to have to spell the obvious out since we all know just how dangerous these conditions are. How many men had to pay for our economic growth with their lives? These workers come from the very countries most oppressed by the imperialist global economic system we are talking about today. The reason a foreign worker is forced to find work in Singapore, is forced to leave home, is a result of many layered factors that stem from imperialism. One of the main reasons is that institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, and World Trade Organization have dictated to these nations that they have to cut government spending, open their markets to Western products, and pay back loans under conditions that made it very hard to invest in their own people and their own future. Trade agreements were written to benefit wealthy countries and facilitate the exploitation of these resource-rich countries. Economic rules were decided in rooms these nations were not invited to. The result is that these nations, while they have an abundance of talent and resources, natural resources, were structurally starved of the capital and policy freedom to use these resources to develop their own nations. So instead, the worker is forced to come here, and we benefit from that quietly, without asking too many questions about why they had to leave in the first place. The poverty that sends them here is by design, and we are beneficiaries of that poverty. So when we talk about solidarity with Southeast Asia, we have to reckon with the fact that Southeast Asia is already here in our homes, and we have built an entire legal architecture to make sure that they cannot speak. We also have ASEAN, founded in 1967 in Bangkok by 5 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Context matters here. This is 2 years after the CIA-backed massacre of somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people in Indonesia. It was during the Vietnam War where millions of people died. It was at the height of Cold War anxiety about communist movements spreading across the region. The founding of ASEAN was explicitly about creating regional stability, but stability that was defined by and for governments that were friendly to Western interests. The Treaty of Amity of Cooperation, which is ASEAN's foundational document, enshrines non-interference as a core principle. On paper, that might sound like sovereignty. In practice, it means ASEAN has never once collectively and formally condemned a member state for human rights abuses, has never taken a unified position against American military intervention in the region, and has no binding mechanism to do that either. Which means the regional framework we have was built to manage us instead of protecting and empowering us. I think regional solidarity can begin with recognizing what we actually share. Every country in Southeast Asia was colonized. The argument here for regionalism is strategic. Individually, each of our governments calculates whether it can afford to take a position. The answer is almost always no. The economic exposure is too high, the security dependency too deep. But collectively, Southeast Asia represents roughly 700 million people, one of the fastest growing economic regions in the world. And we have control over some of the most critical maritime routes on the planet. The Strait of Malacca alone handles about 25% of global trade. It is not that we are without leverage. This is a region that has just never used its leverage collectively because the frameworks designed to bring us together were designed to keep us in line. Singapore's government claims to be allergic to taking sides and pretends to be neutral. But being neutral when the oppression is taking place is taking the side of the oppressor. Let's not lie to ourselves. Singapore has always taken sides. It's taken the side of the US and other Western powers that have colonized, dominated and impoverished so many countries around the world, including in Southeast Asia. We don't have to fall in line with this cowardice. Our role here today at this rally is to make that gap between government behavior and public sentiment so visible, so loud, so impossible to ignore that it becomes a political fact. Something we can remind ourselves is that resisting imperialism is possible, and we have done this before. We follow not in the footsteps of our current governments, but the heroes of Singapore's anti-colonial struggle, our freedom fighters, our labour movement that fought bravely for Merdeka and ousted the British. Our current government will have no choice but to do more if we demand it. Just last October, representing ASEAN countries, Singapore condemned the US embargo on Cuba, its blockade and its damaging effects on the Cuban people and their development, calling for the embargo to be immediately lifted. We do have the strength to take a stand, and the strength will be multiplied if we build stronger regional solidarity and stand up against the terror and domination of the US together. Merdeka is an unfinished project. Here's to Merdeka for the global south, for Southeast Asia, from the grips of US imperialism. Thank you. Okay. Now I will read my poem, which I have not named, but okay. Ami, please help me. My class got one bully. Now my asthma started again. I don't want to go to school tomorrow really. I remember last month, he already pulled Iqbal's chair. Iqbal got hurt and said, that's not fair. But that bully told everyone Iqbal was violent. Just like that, the class went silent. Last week, he sat in Palani's seat. Said he needed it and that for her it was no big feat. Everyone said, Palani, too selfish, too proud, and he just smiled and spoke extra loud. Yesterday he wanted to be class monitor, shouted at anyone who never write his name as if the whole vote was just his game. I keep wheezing, I keep watching. But Ami, he always gives me good toys to exchange. On excursion, he let me sit at the back of the bus. I get to choose my big colour for PE, so I never say anything. I just watch and I wheeze. Bullies draw borders, lines through our forests, our rivers, through families who wake up one day on different sides of someone else's argument. We have been arranged for quite a while, arranged for rubber, for tin, for shipping lanes, for the geometry of a war they deemed cold. Bombed, extracted, structurally adjusted into poverty, but still here. Our imperialist bully dresses aggression as liberation, occupation as security, violence as democracy. And while it may appear tricky to follow the sound of my voice and mark the masked bully, I hope you can unearth that simply because you are the lucky friend to barter with instead of having been bombed, it is merely an elegant way of being owned and glommed. I continue to wheeze and I continue to watch. Maybe I must ask Iqbal, Palani and the class, maybe he will be scared. His time has come to pass because Ami, I want us to be free. Thank you. Okay, before I go away, I will try and do a chant with everyone. Maybe everybody can just stand up real quick for me, please. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do the really simple one. I will say, stop the US war machine, and then you say, end imperialist regimes. Can we do that? Okay. Ready? Stop the US war machine! Stop the US war machine! Stop the US war machine! Thank you. You're very scared, Hello. Wasn't her speech just fire? Can you give it up for her one more time?
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Amber. Amber is a student and a first-generation Singaporean from a Filipino family. Speaking close to home, she'll be addressing the case of US imperialism in the Philippines and how it extends into the experiences of low-paid Filipino workers in Singapore.